What if I told you the deadliest conflict of the 21st century isn't in Ukraine or the Middle East? It's a war that has killed over 6 million people and displaced 7 million more. And yet, you have probably never even heard of it. You might wonder why the international community has turned a blind eye. The answer is hidden right in front of you. To understand why this war exists, you have to understand where it exists. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the second largest country in Africa. At over 2 million square kilometers, it is larger than the two biggest states in the US combined, in Alaska and Texas. Right at its eastern edge, tucked into a narrow strip of mountains and rainforest, is a region called Kivu. This is not the Congo you will picture in your head. This is dramatic high-altitude terrain, a landscape of thick forests and active volcanoes born from the tectonic splitting of the East African Rift. It is so rugged and remote that barely any roads exist. In fact, the DRC records more thunderstorms than anywhere else on Earth. This is not a place the world was ever going to find easy to reach. It sits at a crossroads of borders in the centre of Africa, with Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi to the east. All three countries are pressing up against this one mountainous strip of land. Now here's the thing about Kivu. The capital of the DRC, Kinshasa, sits 1,000 miles away to the west. That's roughly the distance from London to northern Morocco. The Congolese government has always struggled to project power this far. There are no major transport links and no reliable army or police presence. In eastern Congo, the government isn't just weak, it's effectively absent. That absence creates a vacuum that is just waiting to be controlled by other parties, making it the perfect breeding ground for conflict. Now, to understand who is fighting this war, you first need to understand what happened 30 years ago in a neighbouring country. In 1994, Rwanda experienced one of the fastest and most organised mass killings in recorded history. In just 100 days, an estimated 800,000 people, predominantly ethnic Tutsis, were slaughtered by Hutu extremist militias. Whilst this disgraceful genocide was taking place, the world watched and did almost nothing. When a Tutsi-led rebel force finally ended the genocide and took control of Rwanda, the perpetrators fled, and the place most of them fled to was eastern DRC, right into the Kivu region we just looked at. That treacherous strip of land where no government has ever had a firm grip. Those Hutu extremist fighters didn't disband. They regrouped in the forests of the eastern edge, forming a militia called the FDLR. And their presence across the border gave Rwanda a justification it has used ever since: the claim that it must intervene in Kivu to protect itself. That single event, the 1994 genocide and the exodus that followed, is the root of almost everything that comes next. Because the DRC itself was already in crisis. The country had been a Belgian colony until 1960. And Belgium's approach to colonial rule was among the most brutal in history. The Belgians extracted everything that they could from the land. Resources such as rubber and ivory were taken by force, with little left behind. In the mid-1990s, when the country was still called Zaire, it was governed by one of the most corrupt regimes in the world under Mobutu Sese Seko, a man who ruled for 32 years with an iron fist. When Rwanda and Uganda backed a rebel movement that topped Mobutu in 1997, the country was renamed the Democratic Republic of Congo. But the chaos didn't end, it deepened. What followed became known as the First and Second Congo Wars. What followed wasn't just another African civil war, it became something almost unimaginable. At one point, 9 different countries had sent armies into the DRC. Imagine if Britain, France, Germany, Poland, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium and Ukraine all sent their armies to fight a war inside France. That's what the Congo had become. It wasn't a civil war anymore, it became known as Africa's World War. Rwanda, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Angola, Namibia and several others were all pursuing their own political and economic interests on Congolese soil. A devastating 5.4 million people lost their lives, mostly through disease and starvation caused by displacement. It is widely considered the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. A peace deal was signed in 2003, but peace on paper meant very little in eastern Congo. The Kivu region remained lawless and flooded with armed groups. Over the next decade, various Rwanda-backed rebel factions came and went. Each one disbanded, then quietly regrouped under a new name. The latest iteration calls itself M23. That name isn't random. It refers to March 23rd, the date a peace agreement was signed in 2009 between the DRC government and a previous rebel faction. When that deal collapsed, the fighters who felt betrayed regrouped under that date as a permanent reminder. M23 is literally named after a broken promise. The group is made up of predominantly ethnic Tutsi fighters. It rose briefly in 2012, seized the city of Goma, then was pushed back. It went dormant, then in 2021 it re-emerged, and this time it didn't stop. And the reason it didn't stop is standing right next to it. We have to take another look at Rwanda. Overwhelming evidence from UN investigations, civil society groups, eyewitness accounts and satellite imagery confirms that the Rwandan military has been directly involved with M23 since 2022. UN experts estimate around 6,000 Rwandan troops were active in Congo's North and South Kivu provinces throughout the M23 offensive, with thousands more stationed along the border ready to be deployed. What's even more interesting is Rwanda's official position: self-defense. They point to the FDLR still operating in eastern Congo and claim they are protecting ethnic Tutsis from persecution, that they are trying to avoid another catastrophic genocide. It sounds reasonable on the surface, but a UN group of experts report in July 2025 shattered that justification, finding that Rwanda's military engagements did not primarily aim at neutralising the FDLR. Instead, Rwandan forces were focused on conquering territory and consolidating M23's control over the eastern DRC. The report went even further, alleging that 1 week before M23's assault on Goma, Rwandan officials had confidentially informed UN experts that their president, Paul Kagame, had personally decided to take control of both Goma and Bukavu. In January 2025, Goma fell again. A city of 2 million people, the regional capital of North Kivu, the most important humanitarian hub in Central Africa, was captured in days. Then the city of Bukavu, then Uvira, city after city fallen like dominoes whilst the world barely looked up. And as each city fell, the same pattern repeated behind the front lines. The UN documented a campaign of executions, torture, disappearances and forced recruitment targeting anyone perceived as opposing M23. Widespread sexual violence was systematically carried out. Women and girls were disproportionately targeted, but men, boys and LGBT individuals were also victims. The UN concluded these acts may constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. But the Congolese government in Kinshasa hasn't just been sitting back. Because their regular army is notorious for being underfunded and corrupt, the government turned to a highly controversial counter-strategy. Kinshasa began formally backing and financing a loose coalition of local, homegrown militias known collectively as the Wazalendo, a Swahili word meaning patriots. The Wazalendo are described as local youngsters picking up weapons to defend their homeland against Rwandan aggression. But the reality is pure chaos. By flooding eastern Congo with weapons and handing power into the hands of unelected warlords, the government created a monster they cannot control. So when you look at the front lines, it isn't just a clean fight between two countries. It is a dense web of competing proxy forces. Over 7 million people have been forced away from their homeland. Humanitarian organisations were unable to reach the people who needed them most. Imagine a city like Houston, Texas, in which all their residents had to flee, and yet the cameras largely aren't there. But territory isn't the whole story. We need to look underground to find the deeper reason. The very reason for this bloodshed is sitting inside the device you are using to watch this video. Whether that be a phone, tablet, laptop or TV, all of those devices that our lives revolve around are filled with a mineral called coltan, short for columbite tantalite. Coltan is a dull, black metallic ore used to produce tantalum. Tantalum is a rare heat-resistant metal critical for making tiny energy-storing capacitors. These capacitors are essential components found in almost all modern electronic devices. And here's where it all connects. The Democratic Republic of Congo is home to a staggering 60% of the entire world's supply of coltan. And right at the heart of it is a single mining area called Rwanda in North Kivu. The Rwanda mining district alone accounts for approximately 15% of total global coltan production. One district, stuck in a war zone, supplying roughly 1/7 of the feedstock for the entire global electronics industry. M23 seized Rwanda in April 2024, and the moment they did, they didn't just take land, they captured a seemingly unlimited cash machine. M23 imposed a flat 15% tax on all coltan transactions in their territory. The rebels now extract an estimated $800,000 per month in levies from the mines alone. That money funds weapons and soldiers. This war is self-financed, and your phone is part of the reason why. But here's where it gets even more complicated. The coltan doesn't stay in Congo. More than 120 tons of coltan are transported monthly from the DRC into Rwanda, where it is laundered and re-exported as Rwandan product, primarily to China, but also Europe and the US. If we remember, Rwanda officially denies any involvement in Eastern Congo, and yet Rwanda's mineral export revenues have more than tripled from $373 million in 2017 to over $1.75 billion in 2024. A country that doesn't mine much coltan is somehow exporting an enormous amount of it. Global Witness found that 5 of Rwanda's largest coltan exporters have purchased material originating from M23 controlled areas. The mineral crosses the border, gets mixed with legitimate material, smelted, and by the time it reaches a factory in Asia or Europe, its origin has been administratively erased. It is, on paper, clean. Supply Chains Tracking has identified that minerals from Eastern DRC end up in products by Apple, Intel, Samsung, Nokia, Motorola and Tesla. The DRC's government filed criminal complaints against Apple's subsidiaries in France and Belgium, accusing them of using conflict minerals and deceiving consumers about the cleanliness of their supply chains. Apple denies knowingly sourcing conflict minerals and says it has suspended sourcing from the region after concerns over traceability. Now zoom out, because this isn't just about one rebel group taxing one mine. Of the 10 largest cobalt miners in the world, 9 are in the DRC. Of those 10, half are owned by Chinese companies. Chinese cobalt refineries account for 60 to 90% of global refined cobalt supply. For 2 decades, whilst the West largely ignored the DRC, Beijing was signing infrastructure deals and backing state mining companies. The United States has historically underinvested in DRC, while China established control over key mines through state-backed financing and infrastructure for resource deals. And now, as the world's demand for the minerals inside electric vehicles and smartphones is set to triple by 2030, Washington has suddenly woken up to what it's been missing. The DRC is sitting on an estimated $24 trillion worth of untapped mineral wealth. And to put that enormous wealth into brutal contrast, the people who live above it are surviving on less than $2 a day. That is the gap between what this land is worth and what it delivers to the people it belongs to. And that gap, that obscene, deliberate gap, the corruption that leads to smuggled minerals, is what this war is really about. So where does that leave us today? In February 2025, as cities were still falling and death tolls were still being counted, the president of the DRC sent a letter to Donald Trump. The offer was straightforward: give us security assistance and we'll give you access to our minerals. It was, in effect, a minerals for peace swap. and this sparked huge interest from the capital. What followed was one of the most remarkable diplomatic performances in recent memory. In June 2025, Trump brokered a peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda, signed at the US State Department in Washington, D.C., witnessed by multiple African heads of state, and declared by Trump himself as a glorious triumph that had ended 30 years of war. The ceremony took place at a building that had been quietly renamed the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. The Nobel Prize optics were fully loaded. But you need to read the small print of what was actually signed. Alongside the peace agreement sat a separate economic deal which reads, "An agreement to facilitate greater investment by US persons and aligned persons in order to diversify the Democratic Republic of Congo's mining sector, giving US companies first access to Congolese mines currently up for sale, a sector long and deeply dominated by China." The agreement also committed Congo to shipping its minerals via the Sakania-Lobito corridor, a US-backed railway to the Atlantic coast, routing them away from Chinese-controlled supply chains entirely. Peace and profit signed on the same day at a building bearing Trump's name. And here's what happened next. Within days of the ceremony, M23 forces occupied the city of Uvira, executing civilians in door-to-door searches. Human Rights Watch documented 53 executions in the first 24 hours alone. Residents of Goma, a city that was supposed to have been liberated by this deal, said simply, "We are still at war." By March 2026, less than 90 days after the peace deal was signed, the US Treasury imposed sanctions on the Rwandan Defense Force and 4 of its senior commanders for what it called blatant violations of the Washington Peace Accords. Rwanda had signed in December. It was sanctioned for breaking that deal by March. But here is the sharpest edge of all of this. The Oakland Institute argued that the agreement left Rwanda with little economic incentive to end the conflict. The deal had granted Rwanda a privileged role in the refining and re-export of Congolese minerals. Rwanda, the country that had been smuggling those same minerals for years, was now being formally written into the supply chain. As long as that arrangement stood, Rwanda had no economic incentive to stop the war. The conflict was more valuable to them than the peace. The Congolese people weren't at the negotiating table. They were standing on what was being negotiated. Lawyers and human rights defenders in Kinshasa filed a constitutional challenge against the agreement, arguing it had been signed without the knowledge or consent of the Congolese people, and that it prioritised extraction over justice. As of today, the fighting continues. M23 still controls Goma, Rwanda still denies everything, and the minerals are still flowing, raking in billions of dollars worldwide. This war has lasted 30 years. It has survived 9 peace deals. It has outlasted every ceasefire, every summit, every statement of condemnation from the UN Security Council. And the reason it keeps surviving is the same reason it started, because the people with the power to end it are making too much money from it. The Kivu conflict is not a forgotten war, it's a managed one. The next time you upgrade your phone or buy a new TV, it's worth a thought. This war has been fueled by the technology we consume without question. You can't fix this alone, but the first step to breaking it is at least knowing that it exists. And if this video made you aware of it, subscribe to Mapped Out.